Do you understand the words that are coming out of my mouth?
Quiet, numbskulls, I'm broadcasting.
Can we get serious now?
One thing that did happen during the 60s was some music of an unusual or experimental nature did get recorded and did get released. Now look at who the executives were in those companies at those times. Not hip young guys. These were cigar-chomping old guys who looked at the product that came and said, I don't know. Who knows what it is? Record it, stick it out. If it sells, all right. We were better off with those guys than we are now with the supposedly hip young executives who are making the decisions of what people should see and hear in the marketplace.
Success in the music business begins with a dream, a vision. This podcast will give you, the listener, the insight and tools to turn that vision into a reality. Meet the industry professionals who work day by day behind the scenes, helping to make those dreams come true. Welcome to the business side of music.
On the show with us today here in Nashville, Tennessee, in our studio, we have Australian award-winning producer, writer, and co-founder of Pacific International Music Publishing. Michael Flanders is in the studio with us. And if you don't know, he's from Australia. The first few words he says, I'm sure, will clarify that for you. Welcome to the show.
G'day.
You and I have a mutual friend.
Yes, we do.
A gentleman by the name of Tim Riley, who you've known for about 5 years, and I've known since the dawn of time. and you two are working on some projects together. You're kind of creating a little bit of synergy out there.
Yeah.
Before we head down that path, let's talk about you for a few minutes, if you don't mind.
Sure.
How'd you get started? Were you originally from Australia, obviously?
Yep, originally from Australia, born in Brisbane, Queensland. How did I get involved? Pretty simple. My folks bought me a little tiny guitar when I was 9 years old, and that kicked the ball off. So, and Dad kind of, he was pretty much into like Australian country music. So not that I was overly favourable of it, you know.
Right.
But that's what kind of kicked it off. And we used to, you know, he taught me and we would jam in my bedroom and he'd bring a guitar in and away we went, you know. So like most kids, you know, I ventured away from the country thing, got into the rock thing, played a million gigs, and it circled back. I think that the more and more I got involved in the business of music, which I got heavily involved in. And it was all, I always kind of consider, I always followed the song. You know, like, okay, I wrote songs from a really young age and I always wanted to find out, okay, there's the inception, where do I go? What's the journey? And the journey, as you know, in this business has taken you down multiple different rivers, you know. And so I think my curiosity constantly forged those different directions. One of them, you know, I wrote a bunch of tunes at one point for a band, and Warner Brothers was signing the act, and then they found out I wrote all the songs.
Oh. So
it was like, that was kind of my first door open. And when that door opened, I put my foot in it, you know. It was my first real negotiation. It was my first time I'd worked with the head of the company. You know, the head of the company back then was John Brommel, Warner Chappell Music Australia. And he was a wonderful mentor. So he'd kind of kick me and say, what did you do that for? You know, I thought I was on this genius idea, you know. And so he would redirect those genius ideas to something that would be more profitable. And I think I've always had kind of an entrepreneurial kind of streak. So then he would inspire something and then I would take it to the next level and then wait to be kicked again and then redirect myself. And that's because there's no book on this, is there?
Well, there's a lot of people that have written books, but we all pretty much write our own as we go along.
Yeah. You know, as that, of course, I did read tons of things, got very involved in reading musicians' autobiographies, you know, and I just loved that. But John, coming back to John, he kind of directed the sensible business maneuvers. So I was in a different state than him. So I was in Queensland. The head of Warner Chappell, or Warner's, was in Sydney. So I was kind of someone on the ground up there that could then navigate new possibilities for the company as well. So I did a ton of joint ventures. And that also took me to a joint venture with BMG. So I went on to having a record label, and that was kind of an interesting journey, to say the least. We think we know everything, but we really know nothing. And so it's been a journey, and I think by doing all those things, then you become more valuable for folks as you get older and mature yourself musically and business-wise. So I've been able to help people navigate, and like with Tim, for instance, he's been doing this for 100 years, and so he knows a bunch of people that I don't know, and we all just use our connections. I've got wonderful connections in this town. I was just on the phone to Mike Kraske, the ex Sony guy, on the way over here, and he had sent us an artist my wife's been writing songs with, and so it's all people, isn't it? Being able to weave in and out and see how you can make your own living doing what we constantly chase.
It's almost like a brotherhood or a sisterhood. I guess to a certain extent you could say it's nepotism of sorts, even though it's not a bloodline nepotism. But knowing everybody, and we've talked about this on the show in the past, other episodes, relationships are so vitally important, and you talk about that when you started in Australia. When you made the move from Australia to the States, were you able to bring any of that with you, or did you have to start? Yeah,
good. That's a really good question, because I think as individuals going through these, learning cycles, we think we know a lot. And that's our rude awakening. And I think, the dangerous thing is thinking you do. I had ventured over here multiple times. I mean, lots of times. Luckily on the budget of different publishers and labels at different times, pitching different projects I'd worked on. I went 9 years running to South by Southwest Music, which I thought that I totally recommend that for people for networking. And I'd kind of worked my way up to be kind of like the go-to guy in Queensland. And other people would come from different states, but I did a lot of records. And probably 10 a year. I mean, I had 12 months a year, and I would probably do, on average, about 10 projects a year.
Now, when you said you were doing projects, you were producing?
Yes, I was producing records, coming over here, finding opportunities, coming over here through Warner's writing. Dale Bobo would hook me up with different co-writes. So I started integrating, and I don't think when I was integrating I ever thought I was going to move. And then I did a project with a gentleman in Australia that was the Pacific International Music guy, and he was like, well, let's set something up over there. And I thought, I can do this. And it was a long learning curve, but eventually I acclimated. But I think also culturally, and this is even from a songwriting standpoint, I think because we all speak English, we think we're all culturally the same. Well, you can definitely, if you're from California, you can't say the Californians are anything like these guys from the South, right?
No, absolutely not.
And their language is different.
Right.
And this was something that I more discovered later than earlier, that while co-writing, you've got to really let the cultural co-writer use their blood more than yours. So I would find my strength in the right and stay out of his or her strength. And especially lyrically, I wrote a tune a couple of years ago, and I had said, something about the truck or whatever, a tricked out truck, and he called it something else. It was just little lyrical things that I would have used that he completely went, oh, we don't say that, And I think that's important to be able to acclimate properly and step back. And I think we make, especially Australian culture, I think we do make a big mistake of just diving in and we're the best, we can do this, and you're going to get a smack around the back of the head, because you don't know, and you got to learn how to really work with people. And as you know, the culture here is much more sympathetic. They're very well mannered. Even if they don't like you, they're well-mannered, So it's like, how do you really figure out, is that an associate? Is that a companion that you can work with? And because sometimes yes means no. No means yes. So I had a lot of learning in those first couple of years. I got a lot of smacks in the back of the head, but only to then find out you're real friends, you're people that you could really work with well, and I still have them today, you know.
One of the things that I've always liked to say, especially to young singer-songwriters, artists that come to Nashville, is it's literally kind of like that old John F. Kennedy saying, you know, don't ask what someone can do for you, ask what you can do for them.
Yeah.
Because I think that really, especially in Nashville, where everybody's trying to get a leg up, everybody, as you said, is trying to get a foot in the door.
Yep.
Everybody's trying to create some kind of energy, lightning in a bottle, and it's not easy.
No.
You know, this is a very, very deep pool of talent.
The best in the world.
And literally the best rises to the top.
Yep.
And so you have to constantly swim upstream to get there. So finding those people that can help you needs to start with who you can help.
Yeah.
Did you kind of see that yourself when you started, that, you know, let me reach out to some people and see how I can help them?
No, probably not.
No, really?
No, I think that we set up an office on the row, and we brought with us a pretty strong catalogue already. One of the admin deals or co-venture deals that ABC Music Australia had done was with Murrah Music here. And so we had a home. And so we could work with them. And then the more I kind of figured out my strengths and what I wanted to do, it was kind of like, you know, we collaborated on some things and some things we didn't collaborate on. Eventually, I built my own stable of writers that I felt that I liked. Still did a bunch of production work on the side and enjoyed that. But I then had my own song pluggers. They had their own. We would sometimes both be working the same tracks. But yeah, it was definitely a learning curve. I didn't really think of it, how can I help? Because I was writing the checks, so I had to be extra cautious as well. So, but you know, we built something that was still desirable today, and it got sold off in segments. So there was some good value that we'd built. And believe it or not, some of the catalogue ended up with a company that I still consult for now. And I started that in 2007. It's 2022. And I still work part of that partial catalogue every month. 15
years later.
And some of those songs are just still, there's a handful that are just killer tracks. So, and it's sort of funny. It's funny because if you look at the journey and think about the journey opposed to just letting the journey happen and not thinking about it, when you go and sell a catalogue, those assets, there's assets other than the master recordings. There was still work tapes in that catalogue. And when the new hands came in, it gave me time to go, because I had to dive deep, you know, and find what is this whole catalogue. What is it? You know, how many tunes is it? And so there was a bunch of work tapes that went with it. And I'd called up the new owner and I'd said, I found songs that I missed. Yeah,
wow.
And a couple of them have been cut since then. And I mean, what I would classify a cracker hit, you know, brilliant lyric, great writing, great melody. And so I started reworking that catalogue. And even my wife recently, she's a great writer. There's songs that now we're starting to look at that kind of getting dated, you know, the demo's dated. And the other night, a dear friend invited us down to 3rd and Lindsley, and we saw a bunch of hit writers, you know, and he'd already had tickets, and he said, hey, come down with me. And it was funny that I heard, I can't remember his name, the guy that wrote I Swear, but his journey, like 15 years of trying to pitch that song, and then to think that whole song changed his and his co-writer's life. I mean, you know. And
a few artists along the way, too.
Yeah, well, you know, John Michael Montgomery, and then it was with the boy band, All For One. Yeah. And it was, you know, the night went on, you know, and finally that's his ending song, you know, but the guy who wrote it, I mean, wrote a bunch of great hits. I can't remember his name, unfortunately, but you will. You'll find it.
Yeah, I'm going to find it.
You're digging.
I'll find it.
You're digging. But it's the truth.
Gary Baker and Frank J. Myers.
Yeah. Frank was the guy down there, and his story was just plain Jane, like how he got to town and what he did. And he wasn't really a songwriter when he came to town. He was a guitar player, And he told that story in the round the other night. And I think any young writer should go to those things and really take it all in, because it is your attitude. It is your ability. And you could tell by his chord phrasings that he was a nicely schooled guitar player. He wasn't just a hacker,
Yeah.
He was a good guitar. And I think his melodies and his understanding of melody through his chord changes is what he brought to the table, probably more than... Because the lyrics were beautifully written, but very, very simple. Great, simple stories. And most people, that's all they can take in anyway. I think the more sophisticated you get, you got a different market, haven't you,
And I think, like you said, you carry these songs around for a long time, and you're eventually hoping that you'll find someone who will embrace it and love it just like you did when you created it. I know that, or I've heard the story that the gentleman that wrote I Can't Make You Love Me, which was Bonnie Raitt's smash hit, was a former NFL player. He wasn't even a songwriter by trade, at least not initially. I would love to pick his brain one day and and ask him, what torment did you go through to create that song? Because it's...
Well, I think you hit on something there too, I mean, some of the greatest writers are tortured, and one of the writers, I won't mention his name, but handed in, way more songs the year that he should have. He was suffering with depression, and I had no clue he was suffering with depression, but he was writing like a demon, So, you find that, it's like when you're not happy, you're probably pouring out your best stuff.
I think so too. Absolutely. And that's kind of a sad commentary, but that's really how some of the best stuff comes about.
Yeah, because you're in that emotional mood. You're down. Your body, your heart rate's lower. Everything's gone. So I totally believe that. But so that's part of the journey. I came here. We set up that entity. We worked it for years. I've been doing all kinds of music industry consulting because of the record label and publishing experiences. And the older you get, the more as you've got to really keep up with the times. I mean, a very wise industry executive said to me one day, Mike, forget everything, but only from 5 years on now, that's all this is the new business, So forget the last 20 years, it's this last 5. And that's kind of, it's moving so quickly, Are we going to have radio at all, terrestrial radio soon? Right. Here we are doing these podcasts. We got the streaming, YouTube, people, Yeah,
I don't know how terrestrial radio is hanging on, but they are for now.
Yep.
In the studio with us today here in Nashville, Tennessee, Michael Flanders.
Hey, friends, this is Dan Schaefer. Check out the episode that I was in with the great Bob Bender, The Business Side of Music. Check it out.
You're listening to The Business Side of Music.
Hi, everyone. I'm Larry Butler, and I want to send you a free digital copy of my new book, The Singer-Songwriter Rulebook, 101 Ways to Help You Improve Your Chances of Success. That's right. Everything you need to know to launch your career as a singer-songwriter, all based on my 40 years in the live performance arena. And believe me, I've seen it all. In my book, you'll find the 10 things you have to deal with before even thinking about becoming a singer-songwriter performer. You'll also learn about the 5 things every singer-songwriter can do this weekend to make their live show better. 5 things I can guarantee that you are not doing already. Plus, there's tips on songwriting and staging, photo and video shoots, publishing, merch, dozens of other topics. All written for people who don't particularly like to read. And again, it's free. Just go to the Business Side of Music website homepage and look for my book cover. Click on it, and a free digital copy of my book will be yours. I'm Larry Butler, and I approve of this message.
As a musician, you have a dream, that vision of what success looks like for you. Though it's not only about the money, money is part of it. Whether you've been extremely successful or you're just striving to maintain a regular cash flow, you need a plan. Money Concepts can help you develop a customized plan to achieve the financial stability and success you want. For over 40 years, Money Concepts has been providing holistic financial planning services to individuals, families, and business owners. As an independent firm, Money Concepts and their associates are committed to always represent the best interest of the client. It's really about a committed, benevolent interest in them personally. This independence, coupled with that committed, benevolent interest, means they represent you, the client, not a product supplier. It's not about selling products, it's about helping you achieve success. To learn how this can benefit you, contact my buddy, John Adams with Money Concepts at 737-867-9309. That's 737-867-9309. You can also email John at jadams@moneyconcepts.com.
You're listening to the business side of music.
I want to go back, way back, if you don't mind. You said that at 9 years old you started playing guitar, but it was mostly Australian country. What were your musical influence? Who inspired you to really become musically who you are?
It's interesting. When you're really, really young, you're not really a musical sponge. You're learning bits and pieces, and it's enjoyment. And I got a kick out of playing, but I wasn't a music junkie or a guitar junkie. It was just something that we did in the family. I played. Dad would have a jam, and we'd play a bunch of songs. And he was, into the Slim Dusties and the Reg Lindsays and the, Tex Mortons and those kind of Aussie icons. Very country, Talked about the outback and talked about life in the country. And it really, for me, it changed when I got around 14, 15. Of course, you're there at school and the kids are playing Springsteen's Born to Run. And that was one song that kind of really grabbed my ear. Just to think about lyrically. I mean, you're a young kid and you're hearing, every day I'm sitting out on the street, that runaway American dream, it was... Bruce painted in incredible pictures. And so I was like gobsmacked by that. And so I started to dive into that kind of stuff. And then my cousin moved into our house. That was the massive turning point. So he was 2 years older than me. He turns up. His dad was English, and Mum and Dad were going back to England for a while, and we had to look after big cousin, right? If it wasn't for him, I probably wouldn't be sitting here.
Wow.
Yeah, and I wanted to kind of tell him that when he visited me a couple of years ago, but he turned up with a record collection, he turned up with a stereo, and it all jammed into my little bedroom, and he was crazy. I used to have asthma and I had Ventolin, so he'd stick my Ventolin with super glue, because that just came out, to my bedside cabinet. And in the middle of the night when I'm having an asthma attack, I'm lying on there trying to spray it. I had a lot of memories about him. But I'm sitting on the bed, and it was a critical moment for me that he cranked that stereo up, and there was Bob Seger playing Night Moves. And it was those big acoustic guitars. I mean, I'm like, wow. And that started it. From that point, I've never really turned back. The acoustic guitar thing really just captivated me. The sound of an acoustic, a well-recorded acoustic, the tone, great songs. I mean, Down on Main Street, and to think that, drive down here to Muscle Shoals, that was all cut down there at Jackson Highway, right?
Yeah.
And incredible record. And the history that comes out of there is amazing. But that was it for me. And then I started asking questions. And then we get in his little sports car that he had, one of those little ladybug, looked like an MG, but it was a Japanese MG. I can't remember who made him. But we drove to his older brother, which was 7 years older than him. And he lived on a farm, and he had boxes and boxes of LPs. And so then he's telling us what's cool and what's not. So each weekend we'd take home a few and we'd listen and tape them or whatever we did back then. And that got me into, Dylan, Donovan, Jim Croce, Joni Mitchell.
Oh my gosh,
massive influence.
Yeah.
That completely slayed me in the aisles. Still to this day. I mean, I honestly...
Me too.
I don't think anyone's come even close to her, you know.
I still listen to Coyote, and when I do, I crank it up, you know, especially Jaco Pastorius on the bass.
Beautiful.
Or Woodstock, or, you know, just any of those. And you talk about a storyteller. Yeah. She was more than a lyricist.
Oh, totally.
She could take you down. She was reading a book, but singing it to you.
Unbelievable.
Yeah.
No one has ever written like that. I mean, I worked on a project a few years ago, and one of the writers was Larry Ratso Sloman. I don't know if you know who he is. He's an iconic American writer. So he wrote Scar Tissue, Anthony Kiedis, you know. He wrote On the Road with Bob Dylan. He wrote the last 2 books for Mike Tyson. I mean, very decorated writer, right? And I'm sitting there one day and I say to him, he was on the Rolling Thunder tour. He was the Rolling Stone editor. I said, he's in the Rolling Thunder film. He's in there when he was a young fella. Anyway, I said, did you get to talk to Joni Mitchell? Oh, yeah. Did I make a mistake? He says. So he says, he sits down and does an interview with Joni and says, so what's it like being the most decorated, or whatever word he used, female writer in America or the world at the moment? And she says, what's it got to do with me being female?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So you can see that, you know, her and Dylan in there, and the kind of rub, you know, it's like 2 incredible songwriters, and you know, and she's playing Coyote. If you watch Rolling Thunder, she plays it. So it must have been a fairly freshly written song. But, you know, just driving your car and, you know, listening, you know, getting home with my reel-to-reel. I mean, what? You know, it's so vivid.
She actually was able to paint a picture that made the desert look pretty.
Yeah.
I mean, that's just how deep she was.
And then when she's not writing, she is painting.
Yeah, that's true. That's right. And it doesn't hurt that she hung out with the likes of Levon Helm and Rick Danko and Robbie Robertson and, you know, all those guys from the band too, because creation breeds creation. And when you get that many creative souls together, something good's gonna. And I think the same thing happened when she was with, you know, with Crosby, Stills and Nash. What?
There's a wonderful documentary about her life, and it seems to me that the pain she went through with the adoption haunted her for years and years. And then when she finally connected with her biological daughter, things became more pleasant for her. You know, did she stop painting or writing or whatever? But you go back and listen to a lot of those songs, I mean, you can hear she talks about it quite a lot. You just got to be smart enough to know what she's talking about at that point in time.
You have to really be in tune.
Yeah. And I think The River, you know, when she talks about, I think the first line opens up or something about I left my baby behind or something. You know, I can't remember now, but there's songs that I have still to this day on my playlist, like Coyote, you know, California, Carrie. You know, there's a lot of songs. They bring me so much joy because around that time I got introduced to listening to her. I didn't have a worry in the world. It was a wonderful period of life. And music's supposed to take you to those places and you reflect upon that. So that's kind of how I felt. I can go to that safe place by listening to California or Carrie or something, you know, and it's just beautiful music. And I think anyone that wants to be, you know, her audience has to be a thinking audience. You've got to be a thinker to be a Joni fan, you know. It's so sophisticated.
Do you think we're missing that these days, or is there someone out there that is writing like her?
And how do you answer that? But I think there's always someone out there that can inspire you. I think that radio in general is interesting right now, and you probably don't know, but you know, one of my passions is steel guitar. I play steel guitar. I like to listen to a bunch of stuff these days. As I'm getting older, I'm way more cranky about what I listen to. I get in the car with my daughter, I just want to lynch myself,
Right.
It's like my listening enjoyment has gone, and you bring up, the band and people like that. I mean, I was at a restaurant recently, believe it or not, in New Mexico, and it was like they were playing my record collection. And the guy I was sitting opposite, he was saying the same. We were listening to James Taylor and Carole King and the band. And, to me, the night they drove Old Dixie down, we're talking, to me, it was an incredible period of life in the 70s. I mean, it's not so bad being 59 right now when you know what we had. But it's interesting now. I said to my wife yesterday, we were driving along and I had 103.3 and it was Whalen or Hardy or there's tons of steel guitar coming back into these new youthful recordings, which is great for a steel guitar player but I always found too, when I couldn't find the sweet spots, the new Jonies or the new whatever, Texas artists always provided something of quality when it came to great songwriting and lyrics. There was a writer here in town for years and he went back to Texas. I don't know if you come across him, but his name was Walt Wilkins. Incredible songwriter. There's a guy down in Texas called Sam Baker. Incredible songwriter. I jumped in a car in Austin one day. A buddy of mine was driving and I jumped in and there Sam was. I had no idea he was going to be in the car, and I think I'd met him once before through some friends. And I was this would have been like 2005, and I'd just heard a record, and there was a couple of songs on, one song called Waves on there. It literally throws you to the ground. Talks about this relationship between a man and a woman, and she's gone, and he still walks along the beach and remembers her footprints in the sand and how the waves wash him away. Incredible writing.
Yeah.
And I jumped in and I was like, just a stupid question. I'm like, how did it get to that point? Where you can write what I would have considered, Dylan genius or Joni genius, He said, I got sick of saying, I hate you, bitch, or whatever. And I'm like, that's totally not the answer I was looking for. I met Ry Cooder a few years ago, and being a slide steel guitar player, meeting the iconic master, basically.
Somebody you look up to.
Completely. And how do you meet someone you look up to at that level and not be a cheeseball, right? So it was kind of difficult. So I went into the green room and Ricky Skaggs and Ry, and they're all in there, and I put my hand out and I said, look, I don't want to be a cheeseball, but I have to tell you how much you influenced me, and I really appreciate it. And we got into a wonderful conversation about Flesh on String and all kinds of stuff. And when I was leaving, it was kind of hilarious, and I didn't even think about it, but I asked Ricky Skaggs to take a photo of me and Ry, and I think Ricky was like, what about me?
Yeah. My chop liver?
Yeah. But I was such a Ry fan that, and so he was up there with probably my top 5,
I think we all have those in our personal library that we would love to meet. I know that the one or two that I've had the opportunity, it's kind of that same thing. You just you almost feel like there's a barrier between, you can't get too close to them because you don't want to break them or whatever. And it's okay. We all get a little goofy at that point.
Yeah. It's funny. We've all met, amazing individuals. I was over there at Nashville one afternoon late, getting a very late lunch. And that was it. It was only me and one other guy in Nashville, and the other guy was John Hyatt.
Oh.
And I'm like, I just love the Bring the Family record with, Keltner, Ry, Nick Lowe, and John. And John is, to me, one of probably the American songbook at the moment, is one of the greats, Love his lyrics, love a lot of his records, and one of my favourite songs on that record was Lipstick Sunset, where Ry's playing this beautiful slide solo. I didn't go over and say anything. I just thought, I want to.
Yeah. At the same time, though, when you mentioned Jim Keltner, I worked with Jim back in the late 80s on the road. And one of the most humble, quietest, and at the same time thought-provoking. When Jim Keltner was going to say something, you stopped because you knew that this was going to be a Charles Schwab moment. He was going to tell you something that you needed to understand. You have to think about it sometimes. That's how their minds work. It's that whole creative process. They look at things totally different than normal people, most people.
Well, his whole life has been abstract. And the opportunities he's had because he's abstract probably, would have never happened if he wasn't that individual.
Right.
I mean, in saying that, I bought Get Rhythm, Raikuda, back in 2000, maybe late 90s maybe, Put that on the stereo, right? And I'm like, wow. I mean, if you listen to the opening track on Get Rhythm, it's Johnny Cash's Get Rhythm song, and the way Keltner approached it sounds like three drummers, and it's Jim. And, he would, tie the bells around his ankles and shakers. He'd tape shakers to his sticks, and... yeah, I mean, how many drummers does that guy influence? Well, in this town alone, I mean, you've got Dennis Holt.
Yes.
Yeah, Dennis, studied Jim and got to know Jim, and he's from California. He's a wonderful Keltner guy, and I work a lot with Steve Brewster. I love Steve's drumming, and he can go to that Keltner place real quick, but it's just that style. It's a different feel, but he's right into rock and roll. I mean, and to think that George Harrison, wasn't it, just picked him out for the Traveling Wilburys,
That's right.
I mean, just imagine if you died after that, I mean, that was it. I mean, to be in that band alone.
Roy Orbison, Tom Petty,
Bob Dylan,
and George Harrison, and
Jeff Lynne.
And Jeff Lynne, yes, from the ELO. And now we want to make you the drummer for us on this, But that's exactly, I think, how Jim probably approached it. It's like, okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah, I don't know who brought him in out of that group, but probably George. I reckon George was the organizer to all those things. He was the guy that would call everybody and get everyone in check, In
the studio with us today here in Nashville, Tennessee, Michael Flanders.
Yo, what's going on, everyone? This is Vinny Potestivo, and check out my episode of The Business Side of Music.
You're listening to The Business Side of Music.
Since 1963, Korg has been creating new experiences in music and performance. That is what drove the creation of some of Korg's most legendary products, such as the Poly 6, the M1, the Electribe, the Triton, the Minilog, the Kronos, Wave State, Op 6, and most recently the Nautilus, which is what we have here in our studio. Korg is dedicated to creating new, innovative, and uncompromising instruments which maintain the highest quality to inspire music makers, past, present, and future. Visit Korg.com or your favorite Korg dealer to get your hands on one of their products and start creating new music always. Korg, the official sponsor of the business side of music.
You're listening to The Business Side of Music.
Let's talk about what you're doing now. We mentioned Tim Riley at the very beginning of this process, and we don't want to ignore our buddy Tim because he's a good guy.
He's a good guy.
And he's been in the business, I think, as you said, since the dawn of time, or maybe I said that. But you guys are working on some things together now. Let's go down that road.
We've done a lot of things over the last few years, but recently a buddy of mine that lives out in Hendersonville, he's been working on a rock record with Richie Scholl, and he's got him up to several 100,000 spins, and that's pretty good. He's moving. Little Lily Grace, a little young artist out of Australia that when I was back, I met her through a very famous Australian country singer, James Blundell. And James had come to my house while we were there, and we cut a 30th anniversary single that he had written 30 years ago, and it was a duet with another guy called Larry Cann. And he walked in, we kind of rented this Hollywood kind of house. It overlooked the water down in the Redland Bay area, nice breezes. It was kind of that open, like Daniel Lenoir vibe. And as soon as he walked in, he went, it's like a Daniel Lenoir kind of vibe. I'm like, yep. And we, it was pretty tacky. We ran cables through the hallways and whatever because it wasn't going to be permanent, So we had a bunch of gear and we cut a lot of records, singles while we were there for that year and a bit, and she was one of them. And
this is Lily Grace you're talking.
Lily, yeah. So we did a Lily and James duet. So I'd done 3 or so singles with her, and this new one that Tim and his team have been working on. She's over 1 million streams right now. My wife co-wrote that song with her,
and she's still relatively young, age
16.
16.
Yeah,
wow.
Yeah. 16 going on 27 or 28. I mean, the brain is completely progressive. She understands more than she needs to understand at this age. She's probably the Taylor Swifty kind of mentality. Maybe this new generation of young people, they got a lot of get up and go. Mm-hmm. I mean, she's motivated. I mean, she'll get up early, like 5 o'clock to write with my wife over the Skype, or Zoom, whatever they're doing. I mean, getting me up at 5 to write, goodbye, So
I haven't even had my first glass of iced tea at 5 o'clock in the morning.
No, thanks. I just look at the alarm and look at the clock and go back to bed. But so that's kind of, Tim has been using his resources to help be more like the marketing team to a record label, and he's kind of the organizer guy that puts it all together. For this project we need this, and this, and so he's kind of the head honcho, putting people in their place.
You having a good time doing that?
Well, I think it's good to know that you can work on music and it has a future.
Yeah,
that's more the way I look at it. It's there's really no fun in it. It's more, success based. It's like, and you get excited when someone hits 1 million streams. It's like that. It's not easy to do.
No, not anymore.
Some of the great records I've worked on are, that I would consider should be completely slaying it, nowhere, or a couple of 100,000 streams, or I worked on this 2 records for Jeremy Parsons. I don't know if you know Jeremy when he was in town. He's a Texan, and he was tied up heavily with the Hank Williams Foundation. Mm-hmm. Yeah, what's Hank's? So Hank Jr., then there was that lady that was his half-sister.
His half-sister, Jet.
Jet
Williams, right.
Yeah. So Jeremy used to travel a lot with her, and, very Hank-orientated guy. And anyway, he started writing, like, really cool Americana music. And so I worked on his first record, just him and I, and that was really cool. And then Tim got involved and helped raise some money and we did a second record with Jeremy. And my son Caleb and I worked on that. And Caleb's like a little whiz kid studio guy, he's a great bass player, good little drummer, good keyboard player, just good all rounder. He's just growing up in it, and his brother. And my older boy is super talented as well. He's the guitar player with the Creed singer, Scott Stapp, and he also goes out with Ella Langley at the moment. So Ben sets the bar, so Caleb's got to kind of reach it,
Yeah.
But he's great to work with because we both like the same kind of music, and you need someone that's that age. So he's been a good help. But yeah, we worked on that record, and they're the records you wish should be Miranda Lambert level now. And it's as good as that. But doesn't mean it's good, it's going to work, or you really need marketing dollars,
But at the same time, you're putting, at least from my perspective, how I look at it, is you're putting good music out there.
Oh, yeah.
And you're still reaching a core audience that is actually going to appreciate it.
Yeah.
And it's going to last more than 15 minutes.
Oh, yeah. No, and the record, that record has grown legs, and he works super hard. He was in town last week touring. He's come, but he lives back in Texas in San Antonio with his dad. He's just a great little artist. And so they're the ones you wish would, give you the stripes,
Yeah.
Unfortunately, they're not the ones sometimes that give you the stripes.
Well, you just keep plugging along.
That's all you can do.
Yeah. Michael, thank you so much for being on the show. Man, what a couple different roads we traveled down.
Oh, yeah. We have. Yeah.
We'll have to do it again.
No worries, mate. Appreciate it.
The Business Side of Music is the creation of Tom Sabella and Tracy Snow and is produced by Bob Bender. The Business Side of Music is recorded at Music Dog Studios in Nashville, Tennessee. Production sound design by Keith Stark. Voiceover and promo by Lisa Fuson.